Welcome to the Daily Dawg Podcast. Today is Saturday, October 11th, and it is game day. Game on, folks. It's time for the 130th playing of the Deep South's oldest rivalry, the Georgia-Alabama game. This is week 7 of the 2025 college football season, and this is your Saturday final podcast of the week. I don't think we'll be back tomorrow. I think we'll be back on Monday with reactions and breakdown of the Auburn game. But if there's something super exciting that requires that we get back and really take this apart, maybe there will be a quick or maybe even a quick hitter for tomorrow. I'm trying to work on making these podcasts both a little more in segments that you can count on, that you can jump to or follow or even share with friends or family as you say, hey, go to this moment or this time and go to this segment. Eventually, hopefully, I will have the moment breakdowns where you could even maybe click on them in the details and you'd be able to go just to certain segments. So today is our game prediction segment, and it's already Saturday. It's already games are already on. Game day's already over, and games are already playing. Alabama and Missouri are taking on each other right now in an interesting early SEC clash. Probably one of the better games of the day when you look at rankings and how teams have played, and for some reason it got put in the noon time slot. Our game will be on at 7:30 p.m., so that'll be a primetime game, Georgia versus Auburn. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to do our game prediction segments. In our game prediction, we take a look at who the opponent is. So we're going to talk about who the opponent is, who's the coach, what do we know about them, just get a little background. How are they playing so far in the year? What's their season been like? So that's what we're going to look at about Auburn. Then we jump into the matchups. And the thing I like to do is just break these down as logically as possible. Some of this seems very straightforward and kind of obvious in some ways, right? You got basically 3 key matchups in any game. You've got the Georgia offense versus the Auburn defense. You've got the Auburn offense versus the Georgia defense, or the Georgia defense versus, I mean, you can say this any way you want, but it's basically their offense versus our defense, our offense versus their defense. And then you have special teams and coaching, which I kind of put together to make sort of the intangibles. Neither one of those by themselves is going to win or lose the game most of the time. At this level, most of the coaches are competent enough to go out there and put a competitive team on the field and know how to get their guys on the field without falling down on their face and just lose the game coming out of the locker room tunnel. And most teams have enough competent special teams play, but there may be a little bit of a decider one way or the other. So we look at those 3. So, again, we're going to look at Auburn, see who they are and what their season's been like. You know what the Georgia team is, so we don't have to go back through that, although we'll compare them and highlight those two. So you can sort of say what kind of season and how are they doing in these ways. Then we do those matchups and we say, okay, here's our 3 key matchups and how do those look? And by the time we're done with that, you'll have a sense of where do we think we are going to match up well and where are we not. And we might get in more granular week to week in those matchups, like this person or this player against that, or this player really, outsizing the rest of the team. Like if you had somebody who was just, getting 4 sacks a game and, and a fumble caused every game or something, that player is so disruptive, you'd have to talk about how they match up specifically. Then we get to what I call the true outcomes. And this is where we get to the final prediction. There's basically 3 true outcomes in every game, right? No matter who's playing who in whatever game, there's a chance that one team will blow the other team out. So you have team A blows out team B blows out team A, or it's a toss-up game. And in the first couple games of the year, or going back to say the last 2 SEC games where Georgia has played Alabama and Tennessee, or Tennessee and Alabama in that order, back to back, those were games where we thought they were going to be pretty closely matched games. So in this category, we called the third true outcome basically toss-up, that either team could win a close game. And that's where Vegas has had those games. All of these games have been basically between 1.5 and 3.5 point spreads. And so prediction models, other things like that always said the same thing. So we looked at these last couple and we called them toss-ups. I'm going to call today's category just close game instead of toss-up. And so the difference being that blowout, we're going to define the blowout as 3 scores or more. So 16 doesn't count because you could have 2 touchdowns and two extra point, so basically 2 drives, you could tie the game if you were down 16, get a touchdown 2-pointer, touchdown 2-pointer. So 17 points, that's 3 scores. or above. We're going to call that blowout for the purposes of the way we evaluate this. And we're going to call a close game anything that's 2 scores. Although I'm really thinking of 1 score to, like, say, a 7 to 10 point game is really what I'm thinking close at. Once you start getting towards a 14-point game, it's, on the border of blowout. And, you could have a blowout that becomes a close game at the end. For instance, you could be let's say that Georgia gets out to a 18 to 21 point lead back and forth throughout the whole game. And let's say they're leading going into the final 8 minutes of the fourth quarter by 21. Let's say it's a 42-21 game. And we start getting our third, fourth stringers, and even guys who I don't even call fifth string, but just deep backups in the bench on defense. Their offense stays out on the field, or their offense is, they put some backups in, and the backups start making some headway. Long story short, you get the idea. Let's say Auburn against our backups. Let's say they're down 21, but against our backups, they put a touchdown on the board with 2 minutes to play, and the final score is 42-28. Well, technically, by the way I've defined it, that's going to be in the close game category, or a 2-score game, as opposed to a blowout, which was a 3-score game. But if you were watching the game, you knew it was a 3-score game the whole time. Maybe even you were up by 28 for most of the game, and then it kind of 21 going into the fourth quarter, and then you ultimately hold on and win 14-point victory. But it was never that close, and that ends up being one of those games you hear people say all the time. A game that was not as close as the score would indicate. You saw that last week if you watched the Miami FSU game. Miami was up 28-3 for a substantial portion of the late part of the game, and then Florida State goes on a rally. They sort of throw everything into it. Miami's defense obviously was starting to wear down, was getting tired. They had subbed liberally. They obviously didn't want to give up a bunch of yards and points to Florida State. They didn't want it to become a close game. But the final score was 28-22. That would suggest it was a 1-score game or a 6-point game. But if you watch the game, Miami dominated and controlled that game. FSU was really not in the game in the second half. And the late points amounted to a nice rally. It's a credit to Florida State. They didn't roll over and give up. They gave something to their fans to watch. They showed some fight. And that may speak well to how they play the rest of the season. We'll have to see. But it did not indicate that they were really competitive with Miami completely during the game. For the most part, Miami, just dominated that game. So that gives you a little insight. Again, we've talked about this before. That gives you a little insight where we're going. We're going to try and keep this short today because, again, it's already into the middle of the day. Our game's not till 7:30, so you got some time to go through this. If we can keep this to about 35, 40 minutes tops, 30, 35 minutes, you can listen to this as your day goes on. Get the predictions, get part of the conversation. Feel free to get back with me later and tell me what you thought about it, or just keep an eye on how my predictions came out, and then we'll talk about how accurate I was and my assessment of this as we look at this again on Monday, most likely. So let's jump in. Who is Auburn? What do we got, Auburn? I mean, we know Auburn. We went through the series history. We know the history of Georgia and Auburn playing each other. Every Georgia fan has a pretty good understanding of what kind of team Auburn is. They're an upper third all-time historical SEC team, which means they're also one of the top 15 teams or so of all time in the country. They claim, again, I'm just going to snicker a little bit, they're claiming 9 national championships nowadays, but we all recognize that they have won 2 national championships historically for sure, and maybe a couple of those other ones in the same way everybody else claims national championships. Maybe a couple of those are deserved. They're one of the wins-wise, they're in the top 15 all time. Again, good program, right? 8-time SEC champion. So, but what have they been lately? Well, lately they've not been quite that hot. Hugh Freeze is the coach, and Hugh Freeze is 14-16 so far at Auburn. He's coached 2 complete seasons, and this is now his 3rd season. So we don't have a ton of record to look at on Hugh Freeze at Auburn just yet. But just, to be clear, they went 6-7 in his first season, and they went 5-7 last year. And this year, so far, they are 3-2. So kind of on the same track, okay? And what's maybe most surprising to me looking at Auburn recently, and I could have covered this yesterday in history, but, and I kind of did. I talked about in the segment about where we've been ranked basically in the top 2 to 6 in every one of the matchups of the 8-game win streak we have over Auburn right now. They have been, the last three, they haven't even been ranked. And so in the last three seasons, including this season, Auburn has been appeared in the top 25 poll just for a brief bit. They were in the poll after they won their first three games of this year, and they what a lot of people thought was an impressive win, started out winning against Baylor on the road this year, and so they jumped up to number 22 in the poll this year before losing the back-to-back games to Oklahoma and Texas A&M in their last two outings and falling out of the poll. And they had not been in the poll at all the previous two seasons, and that makes sense when you go 6-7 and 5-7. But they didn't even have sort of a 3-0 or 4-0 start that got them ranked, as some teams might. So they were not in the poll, and they were really, that's just. I mean, Auburn has been. I guess the short answer is they've been a little down on hard times in recent years. So they were last in the poll consistently during the 2021 season. They were ranked at a high of, actually they were in the playoff poll at number 13 at one point, and they were ranked as a high of 12 in the AP poll that year. But they did not finish ranked in the AP poll that year. In fact, that was another 6-7 season. So, in fact, just to look at this, I mean, this is really a bit shocking how much Auburn has moved to mediocrity. I mean, you would look at this record. If I told you, I said, hey, here's a solid SEC team, bounced in and out of the top 25. They've had some guys go pro. They've won a couple games against some top teams, but they have sort of a middling record. And so if I read this off and I said, hey, here's what they've done since the 2020 season, they've gone 6-5, 6-7, 5-7, 6-7, 5-7, and then 3-2 this year. And yeah, they had a couple big wins here or there, and they got a couple sniffs at the top 25. Well, what does that sound like? That sounds like Kentucky, really, right? I mean, and I'm not saying it that all Alabama or Auburn has become Kentucky. I think Auburn's got the history I've been talking about. Auburn's got too much history and too much potential to say they've fallen down to be Kentucky. But they are trending, if they don't turn it around soon, they are trending in the direction of becoming a Kentucky, a team with, a lot of better history maybe of Kentucky. Kentucky has really no history of winning national championships, and maybe just one SEC championship all the way back when Bear Bryant was a coach in the 50s. So I'm not saying Auburn is Kentucky, but right now, on paper, they look a lot more like Kentucky. I mean, they were in the bowl game last in the 2023 season. They lost the Music City Bowl. So before that, their last bowl game was the 2021 season. They lost the Birmingham Bowl. So again, what does this sound like? This sounds like Vanderbilt no, not even Vanderbilt. I'm sorry, Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt now, a new thing, but Vanderbilt that we know and have loved over the many years as a SEC East opponent, that's not who Vanderbilt has always been. So right now, Kentucky, I mean, Auburn's history of the last 5, 6, 7 years has been that they are a middling program. Okay. So, and you say, well, they play us tough. Well, they played us tough in the 2020 the last time we were at Auburn. And there's been a lot of talk about that, about how, Brock Bowers had to have a big touchdown to save us at the end. That was really one of these games that's been a little bit of the hallmark of the last 2 or 3 seasons of Georgia football, or since the 2022 season, the 23 season, the 24 season, so far this year. I've talked about this earlier this week, that we've sort of fallen into this trap a little bit. And that's one of the things that was really nice to see us do better against Kentucky. We've fallen into this trap of being a team that maybe doesn't get off to fast starts like we talked about, maybe lets other teams that they should beat either be in the game or even take a lead, like Florida last year having a 13-6 lead at the half. And Auburn was neck and neck with us in that last time we were at Jordan-Hare Stadium, because they were, we had 2 turnovers on our side of the field in the first half. That helps them spot them 10 points. And I'm pretty sure that game was like 10-10 at the half. And so we would score and pull ahead. And then they were able to run enough offense. We basically spotted them 10 points, I guess is what I'm saying. They ran 10 points worth of offense. And so basically, as you got towards the end of the game, you had a 20-20 game. And as we got late in the game, we finally needed Brock Bowers to make a play, which Brock Bowers did in a lot of games. It wasn't like his one big play ever to save Georgia was. It just normally we didn't see that Brock Bowers' big play be the defining difference of the game, but it was the last time we were in Auburn. And so we came away with that game with a 27 to 20 win, and it felt a little close. And that felt like, okay, there's Auburn, the rival, tough SEC team, and they always play us tough at home. But that was us also putting a lot of turnovers on the ground, which, so we'll talk about that. That could be a difference maker today. Outside of that game, last year we won 31-13 in a game, like I said yesterday, that we described kind of as ho-hum. 2 years before that, we were 42-10, 34-10 before that, 27-6, 21-14. So there's a 7-point game back in the 2019 season, this 8-game winning streak we have against Auburn. You had one 7-point game there. That was number 4 Georgia versus number 12 Auburn. So that was the last time we've seen Auburn, or maybe not the last time, but that was a time where you saw a much closer matchup on paper. And then you have 27-10, another Georgia win, and then 28-7. So those are the last 8 victories. Again, as we come into today's game on an 8-game winning streak, a chance to make that 9 and a chance to take a 10 to go 10 games over 500 in the all-time series against Auburn, which would be kind of an amazing thing based on where that series has been all of my lifetime. And we talked about that yesterday. So what has Auburn done so far this season? Well, go back to Hugh Freeze. I said he's 14-6, 14-16 so far at Auburn, but Hugh Freeze is a good coach. He was at Ole Miss, and he had a winning record at Ole Miss, and he famously had a knockdown of number 1 ranked Alabama, I think. I think they were number 1, but he had a big win against Alabama. Hugh Freeze also, by the way, authored in his early Ole Miss tenure a huge win against early Kirby Smart. One of Kirby Smart's, if not Kirby, I was going to go look this up and see if this is true. I don't know if this was Kirby Smart's worst defeat as a Georgia coach, but it's got to be one of them. We lost to Ole Miss in the 2016 season when Hugh Freeze was coach at Ole Miss. We lost Ole Miss 45-14 in that first season that Kirby Smart took over. So, that's a 31-point beatdown. That may be the worst loss Kirby Smart has ever had against anybody as a head coach. So Hugh Freeze has some track record to point at of being a bit of a giant killer, of having some big games. He won pretty consistently Ole Miss. He had to leave because of some embarrassing things that happened. He ended up at Liberty and had a chance to rehab himself, and he did really well at Liberty. He made Liberty a relevant team that made it into the top 25, imagine, of all things. And then from Liberty, he's got the chance to get back into the into an elite team, or a team that could be elite in Auburn, and try to get them back on track. But so far, the getting them back on track has not been what has happened. So we talk about the matchups. Again, we don't have to do the Kirby matchup. You know who Kirby is. Kirby's the team or the coach who has led Georgia to be the best program record-wise, and maybe by any standard, in the last 5 years in all of college football. Georgia's 57-6 in the last 5 years. The closest to that is Ohio State, 52-8. Ohio State has 1 national title in that time frame. Georgia has 2. So, by most standards, you'd say Georgia is the best team of the last 5 years, and that's who Kirby Smart is. We don't really have to spend much time breaking that down. So from that, we just say, look, Hugh Freeze is a good coach. He's coached in the SEC before. He's won at SEC school. He's won at small schools. And it seemed like a solid hire when they hired him to take over at Auburn. You might remember there was even, that's the same time that Coach Prime took over at Colorado. And there was a little bit of buzz, or some people wondering if with the Auburn gig open, would Auburn consider Deion Sanders as coach? Who knows what would have happened there, but I'm not saying that it was a good or a bad choice either way. But I do think that Hugh Freeze was a solid hire. I have no problem with that. I probably would have thought it was fun if they'd hired Deion too. That would have been a hoot to watch that. This year's team for Auburn is 3-2 on the season. And let's talk about what they've done. So they played Baylor, Ball State, South Alabama, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M. So they won their first 3. And again, like I said, they beat Baylor 38-14, so a 14-point win on the road against Baylor. I don't know how to judge that. I honestly haven't taken the time to go pick apart Baylor's schedule and opponents. I think they may be having a winning record, or they may be up and down. But it seemed, Baylor seems like at least look, that was a solid win to go out on the road and play a team that probably will at least be a 500 Power 4 team. Okay. I think we can generally think Baylor is going to be a 500 or above Power 4 team on the season. So I don't think you're going to look at Auburn's resume with the win against Baylor and say, oh, well, that, put them in the playoff now. They're a national champion if they can beat Baylor. No, but Baylor's solid. So solid win. Ball State, I don't know if Ball State is one of those teams that historically can be a small team that's pretty good. I don't know if they're any good this year or not, but Auburn just beat the ever-living stuffing out of them. Then they played South Alabama. It was closer than it should have been. 31-15 win for Auburn at home against South Alabama. That's not going to impress anybody. Then they went on the road for back-to-back games against two teams right now that look like they could be two of the better teams in the SEC. And we're going to learn more about Oklahoma today. They're going to play Texas. Texas floundering a little bit, but Texas has a great defense. So we'll see, as with every time every team goes out and plays somebody who could challenge them, then we learn more about them. We're going to learn more about Georgia today because we're going to play a team that could challenge us on the road in their environment. So then they played Texas A&M on the road. In both of these games, they lost by one score, 7 points. They lost 24-17 to Oklahoma. They lost 16-10 to Texas A&M. And again, one of those losses, I think it was the A&M, was the one with the controversial touchdown that probably was ultimately a game-winning touchdown that allowed the opponent to score on kind of a trick play. The receiver went towards the sideline, faked like they were going out of bounds, then turned, ran down the field, uncovered, and caught the touchdown. And that simulation of exiting the field and not going is a penalty. That's illegal. That's technically cheating. So the official should have caught that and disallowed that play. Not only should they not have had the touchdown, it should have been a penalty and lost yardage and whatever I don't know what the penalty is. It could be even a loss of down play for all I know. But either way, that might have changed. And so we might be looking at Auburn. I said yesterday we might be looking at them as a 4-2 team. They would have gotten the win, but they also would have had one less loss. So if they were 4-1 with a win over Texas A&M, we would be talking about playing a ranked Auburn team at home right now. That's how fine these edges are sometimes, right? If that call is made and Auburn ends up winning, a close game, and I don't know what the flow of the game was, so I don't know how that would have come out, but let's just say that flipped the game and Auburn wins like a 10. The final score in that game was 16-10. So if that's the right game, again, I don't even know how to assess that. But let's just say that they won a game, 10-9, and against A&M. The way A&M had been playing so far this season, that it might have been enough to have Auburn back in the top 25. So we could be looking at a top 25 matchup with Auburn playing with a lot of confidence at home coming into that game. Well, instead they lost, and they've lost their last two. They're out of the top 25. And when you look at it, other than Baylor, Baylor's a Power 5 team. They have a win over, but then their only other two wins are against non-power teams, and they haven't looked super impressive doing that. So when you really look at it, Auburn has struggled to beat. They're 0-2 in the conference. They've struggled to beat the better teams they played. These might end up being two of the best teams or the upper third teams in the SEC. We don't know that for sure yet. A&M looks really promising. Oklahoma's a little bit more of a mystery. Last year, Oklahoma was terrible offense, but really good defense. They got John Mateer in from Washington State, who was a very exciting quarterback. He's been very exciting for them so far, and now they look like a much more complete team, Oklahoma. And so Mateer was injured, but he's supposedly going to play today. His health will determine a lot of what Oklahoma is. But we see Oklahoma play some more teams. We'll, again, learn more about them, right? That's what all these games tell us. So that's what Auburn's done so far on the season. And taken on the whole, I think you look at it and you say, okay, they beat Baylor, they beat Ball State, they survived South Alabama. We've been there. We've had games against teams you thought you were going to beat one of these cupcake teams, and then you don't by a lot. You just get through it. And so you can't bring it every day against games that are not. And then they fought tough, I guess you would say, against Oklahoma and Texas A&M. But that fighting tough was not enough to make those wins. They came up on the short, just by a score, but they came up on the short side. And we're going to look at we'll break down the offense and defense on those a little bit. Just to give you a big picture, I talk about game flow a lot. I talk about how much you control the game, and you see that in some stats. And now that we're working our way towards halfway through the season, these stats still are not super determinative, but they do tell us a little bit. So we're able to look at these a little more now than we were before and say, what does this tell us? Auburn is minimally out yardaging the teams they play. So they're not really controlling the game a lot. They have been averaging 342 yards on offense and giving up 315. They're winning games by an average score of about 28 to 6, or 28 to 16. I've just rounded off on these. So they're winning the games, but they're 12 point margin. They've out yardage teams by an average of 27 yards a game. Time of possession, they're pretty much even. Third down plays, they're about even. They average getting 34% on third down. Auburn does, and their opponents 27%. 27 is great. As a defense, you'd love to hold the team to 27%. On offense, only getting 34% on third down is not a winning number. So they've been decent. They've collected 16 sacks on the season, which is not bad as a defense, but they've given up 21 sacks. And so coming into the season, if you looked at the experts, and I've mentioned Phil Steele before, if I could speak, a college football expert, does a lot of statistical and analysis and breakdown charts guys for NFL. Smart guy, knows what he's doing when he's talking about football. So coming into the season, he thought Auburn would be one of those teams that, makes his bottom, like say, a top 25 team, an improved team, a team that should be stepping up. And areas where they saw improvement was they looked at Auburn as the offensive line as having 140 career starts. That's a lot. Anytime you get over 100, you got 5 guys across the line, right? So if you got 5 guys who all have averaged 20 starts a game, 20 starts so far in their career, which is more than a season, then you would have then you could have 100 starts, right, with those guys. 20 starts a guy, so, and 20 is more of the season. So again, you get the sense of, okay, that's pretty good experience. Well, Auburn's offensive line coming into this season has had 140 career starts, so that's a lot, right? So I mean, you're talking about guys have been starters 2 or 3 years across that line, so they have a lot of experience. So when you see a line with that kind of experience, regardless of what kind of recruiting that line represented, that usually is a line that's a pretty good unit, a pretty good group. But their line has been disappointing this year by standards. They have their defense has created 16 sacks on the season, which is pretty good. That's not quite, it's over 3 something a game, not quite 4 a game, but in between. And that's pretty good. But their offensive line they've given up 21 sacks on the year, and Jackson Arnold, their quarterback, is a guy a little bit like Gunnar Stockton, who's both with his legs and his arm. So a lot of times, like Georgia has not given up very many sacks. I'll compare that in a second. But so a lot of times you might see somebody, if I told you, well, look, if I tried to convince somebody, and you would laugh at me if I said this, that the Georgia offensive line's the best in the country. Well, nobody thinks that right now, right? But if you look at it, sacks-wise, Georgia's only given up 6 sacks on the season. And I think a lot of experts, and that's up there, that's pretty high up as far as, the least number of sacks. That's just a little over 1 a game. And so that's not amazing, but it's really good. And so my point is if I tried to use that stat to argue that Georgia was the best offensive line in the country, a smart analyst would comment back to me, yeah, well, but look, Gunnar Stockton is a guy who gets out of the pocket as soon as he sees trouble. He's gained a lot of yards on intentional quarterback runs. I don't think you can say that Georgia's an amazing offensive line just because they haven't getting a lot of stacks. I think that's on Gunnar Stockton, his legs. So I'm comparing, say, Jackson Arnold's very similar to Gunnar Stockton in that regard as far as his ability to use his legs. So it's even more shocking, I think, and more of a condemnation on the Auburn offensive line that somehow a unit with 140 career starts that was supposed to be very experienced and a pretty good unit this year has given up 21 sacks so far in 5 games. That's scary. Now, again, maybe A&M and Oklahoma are that good, because those are some teams that really got to the quarterback, put a lot of pressure on Auburn and stopped their offense, and maybe they are that good. But I don't know. I mean, that's still a lot, and it definitely goes against the thread or the grain of what we thought was going to be true about Auburn this year. What kind of team is Auburn going to be? Well, they're going to be a veteran offensive line. They should be pretty good. They also had 4 wide receivers returning this year that were pretty good. I mean, none of them all superstar standouts, but I mean, a really good looking group of receivers, most of them first year last year. These guys are back. They lost some of their top guys, but then they brought in Singleton is a wide receiver that we would have loved to have had, probably from Georgia Tech. He caught at least a touchdown and a 2-point conversion, maybe more, against us in the game last year, the big 8 overtime game. Singleton is a sharp-looking player, and he transferred over to Auburn, and they brought in another wide receiver from Wake Forest. And so the idea was Auburn should have good wide receivers. They had productive guys returning. They added some better guys in the portal. Their offensive line should be good, and they're bringing in a new quarterback, and that's Jackson Arnold. And so last year was the last year of the Peyton Thorne era. They had him a couple of years. He was a transfer from he had been at Michigan State for a while. And honestly, his numbers were solid. I mean, I don't think he got a lot of credit, and I don't think Auburn fans were super excited about the Peyton Thorne era. But Jackson Arnold so far has been just pretty good. I mean, he is, what he has been is he's taken care of the ball really well. Okay. He's thrown 5 touchdowns in 5 games, which is not super exciting, but and no interception. So Auburn has yet to throw an interception on the season. His game so far this year, he's had his best game, I guess. Yeah. His best game overall was against Ball State, which, again, not super shocking, right? They won the game 42-3. He was 24 of 28, 86% for 251 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. And he was averaging 9.9 yards an attempt, which is, again, that 9 leveled up is elite. He also ran for 5 yards in that game. So that was his best game. He only had 108 yards passing against Baylor in the win against Baylor. Not super exciting. He was 65%, but he did run 16 times for 137 yards and 2 touchdowns. Against South Alabama, he also ran for 50 yards and 2 touchdowns while throwing for only 142, 54% completion. So that's against South Alabama. That's one of the reasons that South Alabama game didn't see a lot more offense there is he was not super effective throwing the ball. He had 1 touchdown passing. Against Oklahoma, he had a nice completion percentage. He was 21 of 32, 66%, 220 yards and a touchdown. That's solid. I mean, he put in a decent performance against Oklahoma. He, however, was sacked a bunch of times. I mean, he had negative 11 yards rushing, minus 11 yards rushing on 20 attempts. So obviously he suffered a bunch of sacks in that game. And then against Texas A&M, he was 18 of 33, only 55%, 125 yards passing, no touchdowns. He ran for 1 touchdown on 11 yards. So, he's been effective. And he for the season so far, he's got 846 yards on 134 passing. By comparison, Gunner's got over 1,000 yards on similar total number of passes. He's got 5 touchdowns and no interceptions, so he hasn't created a lot of touchdowns through the air. He has scored 5 touchdowns on the ground. So, again, by comparison, let's go over and take a look at Gunner real quick. Let me just find him. I had him queued up over here somewhere. I say I did, but maybe I don't. Well, no, I guess I don't. Well, Gunner has been, so far on the season, yeah, I should have had that queued up, and I apologize. I really just should have had that sitting and waiting, but I'll pull it up here in just a second so I can tell you about it by comparison. All right, Gunner Stockton so far this year has generated 1,241 yards offense. That's 194 rushing, 1,047 passing, and like I said, he's averaging about 250 yards a game of total offense. He's passed for in the 5 games so far this year, 249, 231, 304, 130 against Alabama, and 245 against Kentucky. So, he's been a little more productive with the ball, I guess you might say, than you might, just compared to, he's got 6 touchdowns to Arnold's 5, and he has thrown the 1 interception they threw last week. So, neither guy is lighting it up in the way that you'd look at and say, oh my gosh, look at that. It's like surefire Heisman, but Gunner has been, I think definitely a little bit more effective and done a little better job making the Georgia offense a little higher power. And to that point, well, we'll get to that in just a second. We'll hold that when we get to that in a second. So we're trying to reflect on who is Auburn right now. Auburn is guided by a new quarterback. They should have some promising wide receivers. They should have a good offensive line. The results have been disappointing. So far, their offense is only getting 340 yards a game. Their defense has taken a step up. They're a little better than they were last year. They're holding teams to about 16 points a game and 315 yards. So that's solid. That's legitimate high level SEC defense, but the offense hasn't quite been there to match. And who they are, the best thing you could say about them as a team maybe is that they have been turnover monsters, in the sense that they're +4 on the turnover ratio so far 5 games into the season. So they are not committing turnovers, and they are getting a few at least from their opponents. So they've been solid in that regard. One thing that stood out to me as a big difference is on long plays. So this is plays that are 10 yards or more. Auburn is ranked 58th on defense. They've given up 65 plays that are 10 yards or longer on the year. But on offense, they're a very disturbingly bad 121 out of 134. So they're 121st in the nation. They've only generated 55 10-yard or more plays on the season. By comparison, Georgia on defense is number 25 in the country at holding teams on long plays. So this is probably something, we haven't been great at sacking the other team. We're not getting a ton of pressure. We haven't created a ton of turnovers. We're actually -2 in the turnover ratio. So we've given up 7. A couple of those I've mentioned were some garbage time or backup, things. So maybe in our first team guys are basically even, I guess I would say, turnover wise. But as a team, we're -2 on turnover ratio for the year. But the one thing you can say about the defense is they have limited big plays. Even though we saw all those big plays against us against Tennessee, it felt like Alabama had a bunch, but honestly, they didn't have a lot of long plays. They had 77 plays in the game, and they held the ball 38 minutes, even though they did not have a lot of running plays. They just did a good job of controlling the game in that way. Most people haven't done that, though. On the season, we're number 25 in terms of only giving up 51 plays on the season of 10 yards or longer, and that puts us in the top 25 in that category. Offensively, a little bit less impressive. We're the 70th best team out of 134 in generating plays 10 yards or longer. We've generated 74 on the year. But in both those categories, we're pretty far ahead of Auburn. Our offense has generated 74 plays of 10 yards or longer. Auburn's only 55. Our defense has held teams to 51 plays of 10 yards or longer. Their defense has only held teams to 65. So we've outdone them by about 14 in that number. And I think that could matter. So, when you're looking, you hear Kirby talk about a lot. You say, well, what about the explosives? So we are much more statistically likely to keep them from having explosive plays and or get explosive plays than they are in this game, and that'll factor in when we do our breakdown just here in a minute in the matchups. I also looked at some of the games, what have they done? So again, they're not great offensively. They're scoring 28 points a game, which is, you'd like to see at least 30 to 35 if you thought you were going to be an upper third SEC team. Only giving up 16 points a game would get you in the game for upper third SEC championship level. But not scoring under 30 a game, and only generating 345 yards offense is not great. And so specifically, they've been not good. Like most teams, they've been their worst against the best teams they play. Look, that's true for Georgia. That's true for Alabama. That's true for Ohio State. Ohio State's going to go out there and put up 550 yards against Kent State. And then when Ohio State plays Oregon, they're going to give up 300, or they're going to put up 350 yards. The game is that's what makes these games much closer, right? Even the Georgia-Alabama game, neither team got to 400 yards offense. It was, like 387 for Alabama and 357 for Georgia. I mean, very close. And the game was a 3-point game. And both teams, were, averaging well over 400 and something yards a game, 450 yards a game coming in, but neither team got to that 400 mark in the game. Both defenses were averaging holding teams under 300 yards a game, the Alabama-Georgia defenses coming into that game. Neither team was able to hold either team under 300 yards a game. So when you play the better teams on your schedule, these stats are going to change. So, but it does tell us something. So how has Auburn done? What in the closest comparison so far this year, Auburn's played Oklahoma and Texas. Well, how have they done in those games? So, well, the answer is in their two, best games, here's what I was actually trying to say is how do those Oklahoma and Texas A&M teams compare? Oklahoma defensively is the best in the SEC. They're only giving up 193 yards a game. And their offense is good, but not great, 415 yards a game. Texas A&M defensively also upper half. They're 289 yards a game. That's not far from what we're doing and Auburn's doing. We are at 315 and Auburn's at we're at 313 and Auburn's at 315 a game. And the Texas A&M offense is the best of all of these between Georgia, Alabama, Oklahoma. I mean Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas, and Auburn. You're comparing all those teams. Texas A&M is able to generate 465 yards a game of offense. So how did Auburn do against those teams? Those teams compare a little more favorably, right? So again, we're kind of skipping past the Ball State game in which they put up a lot of numbers. And I guess that's the key. I mean, against Auburn's offense, has again they've averaged 342 yards a game, but they've been their weakest against those better teams, and that's not surprising. But we'll see exactly how that breaks down. But I wanted you to get a sense of how good are Oklahoma and Texas A&M. Auburn's had to play them. Well, they're really good. I mean, they both generate more than 400 yards a game on offense, and they both are holding teams under 300. Oklahoma's even holding teams under 200 yards a game offensively. So, whereas the better teams we played Tennessee and Alabama. Well, those are much more elite offenses. Tennessee's averaging 536 yards a game. Alabama's averaging 452. So when you look at what our defenses did in those games, those are really high-level offenses that our defenses win against. Probably more so than other than A&M, anything that Auburn has gone against. Tennessee's defense is not exciting, giving up 373 yards a game, but that goes back to what we talked about during the Tennessee game about they also just put their defense on the field for a lot of plays, because actually by per play average, Tennessee's defense is better than Georgia's or Auburn's by yards per play. So if they could just not put their defense on the field so much, they're actually generating good results play by play, just on the field too much. Alabama actually less good by yards per play, but overall, because they're controlling the game well, they're only giving up 285 yards a game on offense. So it gives you a comparison about the two best teams we played and who we played and who they played. So let's take that and jump into segment 2 here. Segment 2 is let's get into the matchups. That's who Auburn is. That gives you a lot of feedback. Okay, that's who they've played. So now let's look at the matchups. So again, we have our 3 key matchups: UGA offense versus the Alabama defense, Auburn offense versus the UGA defense, special teams and coaching. So number 1, UGA offense, Alabama defense. I think the short answer is I think our offense will be, I'm just go ahead and start on the prediction side of this. I think our offense is going to be successful in this game. And the reason why I think that is because, again, I'm looking at what the opponents have done against Auburn this year. So Baylor, while they won that game by 2 scores, Auburn did, Baylor generated 483 yards of offense, averaged 6.7 yards per play. Okay, I mean, Baylor was able to, and most of that was through the air, 419 yards passing. Auburn has been good at stopping the run. They're right about the same place we are, holding teams about 80-something yards a game. But Baylor lit them up through the air. And Ball State, we're just going to throw that out. That was a lopsided statistical game. South Alabama, we're not that concerned, but I will say that South Alabama did generate 310 yards offense against Auburn, so they were, they were competitive. Auburn was able to hold Oklahoma to only 303 yards a game, and that was with John Mateer in the game. But Oklahoma still won this game 24-17. And then Texas A&M was able to put 414 yards offense up, averaging 6 yards a play. So I think when you look at it, I mean, you take the Auburn held Ball State to 68 yards total in the game. So Auburn's average of 315 yards a game, if you take the Ball State game out of there, they're actually averaging giving up over 330 yards a game. And I mean, we could always do that, right? But the Ball State, not only is Ball State a weak team, but that's such an outlier. I mean, 68 yards a game, that is terrible. Even for a cupcake team playing, you don't see that kind of under 100 yards of total offense. So let's just take that out as an outlier and then look at what Auburn's done. Well, they've given up 483, 310, 303, 414 yards. They haven't held any Power 4 conference opponent to less than 300 yards. Georgia, by contrast, on offense hasn't been held. Georgia's been very consistent on offense. We've had 488, 421, 502, 357. That was the Alabama game, and 425. But again, the outlier of the Alabama game, we talked about this before, was that we actually averaged the most yards per play we've averaged all season, 6.7 yards a play, which if you did that for the season, that would be outstanding. The best Georgia teams offensively in the last 20 years were those 21 and 22 teams, that averaged almost 7 yards a play or more in offensively. Those teams were phenomenal. And so we averaged 6.7 yards a play against Alabama, the best we've done of the season. But Alabama controlled the game. They controlled the clock. They held the ball, and we only had 53 plays in the game, where we've been averaging 73 plays a game offensively. So they held us 20 plays under our average. That's what allowed them to keep us to 357 yards of offense and only 21 points. Was not that they actually stopped our offense at all. So again, I feel really confident that our offense, while again, by long plays, we're only 71st in the nation or 70th in the nation on plays of 10 yards or more. But if you just talk about grinding out yards, our offense, you think about the way we've been running the ball, averaging 207 yards a game rushing, the way Chauncey Bowens has been running, the way Nick Frazier can run if he gets it going and doesn't have fumble problems, the way Gunner takes the ball in his hands and runs the ball, keeps positive yards going. And then we've seen good downfield play, and we have a lot of belief. I mean, look, the guys that are out there that can pass catch for us, our tight ends and our wide receivers, all people that I feel really good about, and we've seen very few drops and problems for them. So our offense has been able to do the job against even better defenses and other Power 5 teams, specifically even like Alabama, who's a better defense probably a little bit than Auburn, especially when you take that Ball State game on. And our offense has just been consistent. They've just been grinding out. They really have been basically able to put 400 and something yards a game up every game. So I think that Auburn's defense is solid. I think they're much improved. They're giving up more yards than their points would indicate. And again, I think that's that Ball State game, because they're only averaging, again, they won the Ball State game 42-3. So they're averaging only giving up 16 points a game, Auburn is, and they're giving up 315 yards a game, which might point to more like 18, 19 points a game typically. But when you take that Ball State one out, then it's like, well, they're giving up close to 20 points a game and over 330 yards. And I think that's closer to what the Auburn defense really is. So I think our offense has shown that they can consistently grind yards against anybody. I think they'll win this matchup. And by win, I think they'll be successful enough to generate the yards and points necessary, to put enough time of possession, to do the things necessary. The only thing that would be the outlier in there, and it's just hard to predict this, there's no rhyme or reason to say, well, the Georgia offense is going to go out there and just have a ton of turnovers. Have we had 0 turnovers? No, we've had our share of turnovers. But again, in the flow of the game, when you're not talking about backups in the game, we've only had 4 or 5 turnovers in 4 or 5 games. So I'd like it to be less than 1 a game. 1 a game is not awesome. But thus far, against the better teams, I think that you might argue that the turnover has been determinative. Okay, we lost by 3 points to Alabama, the one loss so far this season. Now we could talk. I have talked extensively about the 4th down play, how we had the ball 3 times in the 4th quarter, or 3rd and 4th quarter, with a chance to take the lead, and we didn't. There's a lot to talk about there, but you can also point back if you want to find any one moment and say we fumbled the ball in our own territory in field goal range. We stuffed Alabama. They lost a yard in 3 plays, kicked a field goal, and they won the game by a field goal. So without the fumble, we might have at least made it to the end of that game tied and gone to overtime, right? I mean, that's a possibility. So when you're not able to dominate the game as much as we have in the previous 4 or 5 years, then games are a little bit closer, then the turnovers could matter more. We had been sort of able to play through. We were so dominant talent-wise that we were not always the best. We haven't been a super great turnover ratio team anytime in the last 5 years. And a lot of times that just hasn't mattered. We've had some games where we've won by 3 scores and had 3 turnovers and gained none. So, but that's not who this team is. So turnovers could make a difference, but I'm not going to predict them. I'm not going to sit here and say, look, I think we're going to have 3 turnovers against Auburn. And there's nothing to suggest that they are going to get that. They've collected 5 turnovers. They've only had 1. So they've been really good. They're +4 on the turnover ratio, but it's not like they're turning the other team over 5 and 6 times a game and creating just massive amounts of turnovers. So there's no reason to think that we will stop ourselves with turnovers any more than normal. There's no reason to think Auburn is going to generate turnovers any more than normal. And there's no reason to think that we won't win the offensive matchup. And by win, I mean do enough to win the game. Put up enough yards, points, time of possession, lack of mistakes to offensively done what you need to do to win the game. The Auburn offense versus our defense. Again, we're not super excited about our defense so far this year. There's been a lot of questions. We're not getting a lot of pressure. We haven't. We're generating almost no sacks. We've only sacked the opposing quarterback 7 times on the season in 5 games. That's not great. That's going to be a really low average. We did. I threw out. We are in the top 25 in holding teams to only 51 plays, like I said, on the year of 10 yards or more. So we're in the top 25 as a defense of keeping long plays under control. And that may be the best thing we do. We don't create a lot of turnovers. We're not getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. But unsurprisingly, we're smart, well coached. We do what we're supposed to do. We've had some missed tackles, and that can be improved. But it hasn't been an epidemic. It's not like they're a terrible tackling team. We've just seen some guys break through some arm tackles and get a few extra yards, and that's led to a little extra time of possession, a little extra opportunity to score. But I don't think we've been killed by yards after contact. I just think it hasn't been as elite as we've seen it in the past. But our defense has hung its hat on. Nobody's running on us. Teams are only averaging 82 yards a game rushing against us. And we've been able to hold good running teams. Alabama's not been a good running team, but Tennessee was. Tennessee's been running for over 200 yards a game like we have, and we held them down to about 125. Half of those coming in the last drive or two in the fourth quarter. So, like we've talked about before. So, I think that our defense has some things it can hang its hat on. Auburn has not been a good offense. I mean, that's the main reason. I don't know if I'm saying all the good things about Georgia's defense, but I think the main truth is, again, you look at that comparison I was trying to make. When Auburn has faced a defense like Oklahoma that only gives up 189 yards a game, well, Auburn got 287 yards a game. So again, even Oklahoma doesn't get the same. I mean, they've blown out a lot of bad teams, right? But Auburn was only able to pass. They passed for 220 yards and 1 touchdown, but they weren't able to run the ball at all. They ran the ball 35 times for only 67 yards. So I think that hurt them, and they ended up losing the game 24-17. They only got 17 points on the board and less than 300 yards against Oklahoma's defense. Against Texas A&M's defense, they only had 177 yards. Texas A&M has been averaging about 290 yards a game on defense. So they're a lot closer to us, but Auburn was only able to generate 177 yards. In neither of these games did Auburn make any turnovers. So Auburn was a little more dynamic last year offensively, but they killed themselves with turnovers. This year, they seem to be emphasizing a lack of turnovers, but it's costing them in terms of efficiency. They're not really getting a lot of production out of the time they have the ball. Against Texas A&M, they only threw for 125 yards, and they only ran for 52, even worse than the Oklahoma game. 24 carries, 52 yards, 177 yards total on 57 plays. So when you look at Auburn, even against Baylor, who I rarely am going to say I think Baylor probably has a great defense. Baylor outgained Auburn in the game. Baylor outgained them 483 to 415 yards. So the only other Power 4 conference team Auburn's played this year, other than Oklahoma and Texas A&M, was Baylor. Baylor, they were not awesome offensively against Baylor. Again, they were able to run the ball for 307 yards in that game, but Baylor was able to put up 483 yards. So again, and so Jackson Arnold was a big factor in that. He ran for a lot of yards in that game. He only passed for 108 yards. So I don't see Jackson Arnold, though. I guess the key there is to say I don't see Jackson Arnold just knifing through the Georgia defense. I think our defense is built to deal with athletic quarterbacks, and we have had some big moments where, like Jalen Milroe in the last 2 seasons when we played them, he knifed through us a couple times on big runs. He didn't consistently run the ball for 190 yards and 3 touchdowns, but he consistently made some plays. Ty Simpson got away and had a key first down and a third down, but otherwise didn't run the ball a lot last week or last time out. Not last week because we played Kentucky. And so I just think Auburn is not a good offense, and our defense is at least middle of the road SEC defense. We're averaging giving up 18 points a game and only 313 yards. We have played 2 of the best offensive teams in the conference, and so that matters, right? Especially in Tennessee, who's averaging over 530 yards a game and 40-something points a game. So, our statistics are, when you already have a game like that out of the 5 games that you've had, compared to Auburn having Ball State and their their statistics. And of course, we had Austin P and Marshall, but you know what I'm saying. It can skew your statistics a little bit. So I think the Georgia defense will be successful against the Auburn offense, mostly because the Georgia defense is solid, if not as spectacular as we're used to, does a good job of stopping the run, is disciplined and plays the gaps well, and is in position where they need to be, and is limiting big plays. And Auburn is not in position to make big plays. They're one of the worst in the nation. And really, that's where Tennessee especially was able to make a lot of hay. And I've said it many a time. I think if I was an opposing team facing the Georgia defense consistently, I would not expect to try to do what Alabama did. I don't think you can expect to make a bunch of medium, short, and occasionally long passes and hold the ball 38 minutes and put up enough points and win. And even when Alabama did that, they only scored 24 points. They didn't score in the second half at all. Okay. So I don't think that's you can't play all game with that game plan. Alabama was able to maximize it in the first half of the game against us, get enough points, hold us back defensively. Our offense again, there's reasons we talked about it, but we were close. We had an opportunity. We lost that game by 3 points, but I don't think Auburn has the ability to do anything near that. So I think our offense, our defense can win against the Auburn offense. So then last, special teams and coaching. We already talked about who Hugh Freeze is. I think Hugh Freeze is a big game coach. He's taken down Alabama before. He's taken down Kirby Smart before. He's shown that he can win with small schools and big schools. He hasn't shown it a lot yet here at Auburn. And so the question is, he's been doing good recruiting. And the question is he on the rise and he just needs a little more time to get his guys in and get what he wants to do? Or is this not working? Are we just seeing a very mid record here at Auburn and it's just not a good fit? We don't know yet, but we know who Kirby Smart is, and I think Hugh Freeze could pull out all the stops in this game, and I think he could be dangerous. I think Auburn could start hot because Hugh Freeze knows enough to go out and do some things. And I have made the criticism that I think our coaches want to go out there and play our game so much that and let the game come to us and then make adjustments. I think a lot of coaches have found ways to start hot with their team against us. Kentucky wasn't able to do that, but Tennessee did, Alabama did, jumped out to big leads, were very successful early. We adjusted and it became a dogfight after that. But Hugh Freeze is a coach good enough to do that. Does that mean he'll win the game or outcoach Kirby Smart? Kirby Smart is still, by record and any other reason, the best active coach going right now. And he's, after 10 years, he's done it a lot of different ways and styles. He's adjusting to this new era that we've been talking about. And I think he's maybe not as elite at this new era yet, but I give him a lot of chance to maybe figure that out. So special teams, I think we continue to just have an edge against most teams we play. Zachariah Branch is dangerous on punt and kick returns. Peyton Woodring is an astounding kicker, and he's as consistent as anybody, if not the best in the country. And Brett Thorson is maybe the best in the country. Again, he had one punt last week, and it was, it wasn't a game changer because the game against Kentucky wasn't that close, but it was a phenomenal punt, and it made a lot of difference in the game, right? Kentucky was pinned in at the one. It was a 60-yard punt pinned in at the one. So nobody's going to out-punt us. Auburn's punter's averaging about 43 yards a game. It's a few less than Thorson. Auburn, I don't know what distance, but they're 4 of 6 on field goals for the year. We're perfect. So again, I think we probably have if the game comes down to special teams play, the need to make a 53-yard kick versus the ability to make it or miss, or whether or not it could be missed. Also, we have blocked, I think, one kick so far this year. Teams have missed 3 field goals against us, or we blocked at least 1 or 2 of them. So, I don't think we had a lot to do with the kid missing the one at Kentucky last week, the 26-yarder. I didn't see that we blocked it. Alabama missed horribly on a field goal, and of course Tennessee famously missed the long field goal at the end. So there's 3 field goals in the last 3 games that have been missed. I guess we put enough pressure. Maybe people are worried about it. We have blocked kicks in the past. So generally speaking, I'm going to say if there's an edge to be gained, special teams, I think we can say on numbers and stats and on the field, we've got that. In coaching, I think Hugh Freeze can be dangerous, and I think that he can help make this a dangerous game. But I think, we still have to look at Kirby Smart as the best coach in the game. So, and certainly in this game. So now we're to the true outcomes. This is where we get to the prediction, the 3 potential true outcomes. I call them true outcomes because, again, it's only 3 things that can happen. Auburn's going to blow us out. We're going to blow Auburn out, or it's going to be a close game within a score or two, right? That's what we defined it as. So let's talk about Auburn blows us out. Look, based on everything I just said, I don't know that we have to spend a lot of time on it. I don't see how a team that's only generating 345 yards a game of offense, under 30 points a game, and who hasn't generated a lot of turnovers, there's just not, I mean, it could happen. There's always a chance we could get blown out. But if we get blown out in this game, just like any other game, Auburn is not good enough. Let me say it this way. Auburn is not a good enough team to go out on their own merits and just surprise us and kick our butt and blow us out. Tennessee wasn't. Alabama wasn't, and they're better teams than us. Both of those teams started out with an ability to have a blowout performance. Tennessee ended up losing the game at home with the crowd behind them. You know that. Alabama was able to hold on and win. You know that too. And as disappointing as it was, again, they did not blow us out. We righted the ship, we pulled it back, and not only did we only lose by 3, and I'm not trying to just be Pollyannish about this and say, oh, it was something great. It wasn't great, okay? But even in the game against Alabama, we should have won that game in the end, I feel like, because we had the ball 3 times. They did not score in the third or fourth quarter, and we had the ball 3 times with a chance to tie or take the lead, and we just failed to do that. That's execution on our part. We don't even need to keep arguing about the 4th down call or whether or not the freshman wide receiver Taylor, whether that was, you know, what happened there with him dropping the ball. And I mean, these things just happen, right? But whatever it was, we had the opportunity. We didn't execute. Alabama out-executed us. They did not outplay us for the entire game. They were not demonstratively the better team. I think we should have won the game. We would have ended up with more points and more yardage had we just executed a couple key plays. And I'm not taking anything away from Alabama. You know, the Alabama defense does its job, slashes through that gap on that 4th down play, stops Cash Jones. I think it's the wrong play. I don't think I would have done the play. We've covered all this before. I still want to give credit to the Alabama guy and say he made the play and we didn't make the play. And that's, you know, so they earned that, right? But we should have earned that. In that situation, I don't care who it is, Alabama or any other team, we should have earned the half yard, gotten the 1st down, gotten the touchdown, and taken the lead, and then see what happens from there. It was ours to take, and we didn't do it. And it's not because we can't consistently execute. And I agree with Kirby on that. We have consistently executed on plays like that and in those situations enough to say we should have expected to do it and we should have done it. So, blowout. Auburn blows us out. I don't see any way that's going to happen, really. I mean, I put it down as 10%. I said I'll give them a 10% chance because, again, you never know. We could fumble the ball 4 times from our own 5-yard line, and they could scoop and score 2 of them, and then punch it in on the next 2, have a 28-0 lead, and then we're just down and demoralized, and we never get going again, and we end up losing, 28-10. I mean, that could happen. Okay, it can happen in any game, but Auburn does not possess the ability to go out and take this game away from us like that. And there's literally no way they could win a game in a blowout against us unless we completely give it to them. And we're going to have to give it not just 1 turnover. And so you see 1 turnover in the game early in the game and we fall down 7 or 10-0. Don't be scared that what I said is happening. We would have to give them at least 2 or 3 turnovers. We're going to have to give them 2 or 3 scores for them to win by 2 or 3 scores. Okay, so I don't even know now that I said that why I put this at 10%, but I'm going to leave it at 10% for the moment because I said 10% chance. Also, just to back this up, by the way, the last time Auburn blew any SEC or a Power 4 team out by 3 scores or more was in 2023. They beat Arkansas 48-10. They haven't done it any time. I mean, they only won 2 SEC games last year. They've 0-2 in the SEC this year. So they beat Kentucky last year 24-10. That doesn't qualify as a blowout. It was a 2-score win. That was one of their 2 SEC wins. You have to go back to the last time they beat us by a blowout. The last time they beat us was when they won in 2017, 40-17. So again, a little more ammunition there. I don't see them doing that. Okay, so Georgia blows out Auburn. That's your next scenario. I think there's a decent chance of that, actually. I mean, the more I've been looking at all the stuff I've just shared with you, the better I feel about this game. And, it's a little scary when you look at it, you say, hey, Auburn was in the top 25. They're playing better, but for 1 play here, 1 play there, they could have beaten Oklahoma, Texas A&M. They could be 5-0 and in the top 15. All that's true. In the end, just like I said about us in Alabama, look, we are where we are. We're down at number 10. We're on the outside looking in at the elite right now. We're in the very good or exceptionally good top 10. We're a team that's still slated from where we are to make the playoff. Nobody says that we're likely to win the playoff right now because we don't look like one of the top. We don't look as good as Oklahoma, not Oklahoma. We don't look as good as Oregon. We don't look as good as Miami. We don't look as good as Ohio State right now. So those are teams that you would put in the lead and say, look, these are top contenders. But Georgia's going to make the playoff, and they're certainly good enough to make a statement about it, right? Well, okay, that's true. And but I don't. The more I look at this, again, the more, I guess the idea was, look, coming in this game, and when this game first got on paper, you said, oh my gosh, we got to go to a night game at Jordan Hare Stadium. Auburn could be better this year than they have been. They're 3-2 and just fell out of the top 25, but they played two really tough games on the road. That's the positive spin. The negative spin is Auburn is still pretty mid-level team when you look at their stats. They've been a 6-6 team the last 6-7 seasons. Their stats say that they're basically that team right now. They're better defensively, but their offense is not really going anywhere. Jackson Arnold doesn't look like he's been the big addition. Their new wide receivers are not they're not getting a lot of plays from their wide receivers, and somehow their offensive line has taken a step back. And so, yeah, they only lost these last two games by one score, but again, they were outgained against Texas A&M, even though they only lost that game by 6 points, 16-10. They were outgained by A&M 177 or 415 to 177. I mean, that's 200 and something yards. I mean, that's terrible. So, I mean, that was a game that was close on paper, on scoreboard, but it doesn't look like it was really close in the way the game played out. They ran for, like I said, 52 yards. They threw for 125 yards, and they didn't turn the ball over, which is amazing. I mean, A&M even gave them a turnover. So that's probably how A&M ends up only winning that game by 6 points, is the turnover repressed the score from the A&M side. So could we blow them out? Yeah, I'm going to say 35% chance. I think, again, Auburn right now is reminding me more of the Kentucky team that we just played than not an up-and-coming, much better team. I mean, Jackson Arnold is a competent quarterback, but he's not doing anything great offensively. Like I said, their wide receivers aren't making plays. They don't have Jacques Hunter anymore, who is an excellent SEC running back. They do have a running back who's getting some decent yards, but their run game has been stifled the longer the season has gone on. I mean, they had 307 in the first game against Baylor, 224 against Ball State. Who cares? 195 against South Alabama, but against Oklahoma and A&M in the last two games, 67 and 52 yards. So we may not be able to sack teams as much but I believe our chance of holding Auburn's run game in check is just as good as Oklahoma and A&M. So I don't think Auburn can run the ball. I think we could run the ball. I mean, I think there's a decent chance. I think you look at the Kentucky game, and we got back, like we said last week, to playing Georgia football, and it looked more like Georgia football. And I think Auburn is, they're at home. They've got the crowd. They're probably a little bit better team, but their actual results have not been that much better than Kentucky. So I'm going to say right now, Auburn profiles is maybe 25, 30% better than the Kentucky team we just blew out by 3 scores, and it should have been worse than that. So I think we could blow this game out. I think there's every reason to believe we could have a repeat game that looks just like last week's Kentucky game, where, we just kind of methodically take them apart and win, 30, like last year's game, 31-13. I mean, I think that's a very reasonable possibility. So, and while we have not been blowing teams out like we were in 21, 22, and even 23, we beat Auburn by 18 last year. We beat Texas by 15 last year. Tennessee, I was thinking, I first mentioned, hey, last November we blew out Tennessee. Well, we actually didn't. It was, by my standard I've set here, that game was 31-17. But it felt like it. It felt like that was a bigger game when I realized, wait, that's only a 14-point game. Well, but we spotted Tennessee, again, the slow start thing. We spotted Tennessee 10 points and then won the rest of the game 31-17. So for 3 quarters, we did blow Tennessee out. It's just we'd already given them a 10-point lead, so it was only a 14-point win. But it felt more like a blowout. And I think that this game could go like that too. I mean, hopefully we don't start slow like that. But I think much like Tennessee was last year, I don't think Auburn can sustain more than a quarter, quarter and a half of success against Georgia. And I think Georgia should win the other 2.5 to 3 quarters of the game, even if it flows like that. And we might win them substantially enough to dominate the game and win by 17 or 18 points or more. So I give that a 35% chance. So I'm still leaning that the 55% chance is the last scenario, which is the close game. And again, I've redefined close game. Coming into Tennessee and Alabama, I said close game was coin flip. Either team wins, 50-50 chance. I'm saying in this game, close game is 7 to 10 points, or even up to 14. Technically, the way I've defined it, it's up to a 2-score game. But I'm envisioning a 7 to 10 point game one way or the other as the close game. Could Auburn win that game? Yeah, I think they could. But I think the money rests on Georgia in that. But I think that there's a reasonable chance. Look, they're playing at home. What they have done, for all the negative I said, they did stay within 7 points of Oklahoma and 6 points of Texas A&M, and both of those games are on the road, and they're at home this time, right? So I think, and Hugh Freeze could scheme up some stuff early in the game to be trouble. So I think they could, and we could have some turnovers and cause our own problems. And if we do, again, I think we'd have to really do a lot to give Auburn just a runaway win, but we could spot them enough points and they could coach up enough ideas and they could play keep away. If we spotted them a 10-point lead and then they play keep away, they could win by 10. It's within the realm of possibility. I think it could go the other way just as easily. They could spot us. They could make a couple mistakes, or maybe nobody makes mistakes. And if nobody makes mistakes, then Georgia's offense should do more than Auburn's offense. Georgia should put more points up than Auburn's did. But it could still end up being a close game. So I think that's the 55% chance. So in the end, this says, the math then, if you put it together, says I'm giving Georgia basically a 90% chance to win the game, because I'm saying Georgia's going to either win a blowout, 35% chance. Well, no, that's not true. It's a 90% chance that either Georgia wins in a blowout or it's a close game between the two of them, and either team could win. But I'm going to say on the either team could win a 1 or 2 score game, I'm giving Georgia 65% chance of winning the close game. We've already won close game on the road against a better team than Auburn in Tennessee. We lost a close game at home to a much better team than Auburn in Alabama. So there's very little reason to believe, even if it's a close game, unless we shoot ourselves in the foot, there's very little reason to believe that Auburn will just play a close game, outplay us, and win the game straight up. So I think with that, you could set the number at about 65 or 70%. Let's just call it 65%. So if Georgia has a 35% chance to win a blowout, that's 100% on their side. 65% of the 55%, I guess if we're adding that all up, I didn't think to do that in advance. So if you got 55, 65%, let's just say that in the end, I guess this mostly adds up to, I should have done the math on that in the beginning, but my little math formula here says that I'm basically giving Georgia about a 65 to 68% chance to win the game, which is pretty close to what ESPN's FPI did. And by the way, FPI's had us at anywhere from about a 62 to 65% chance of winning the game. That's their little formula and predictor. And the line has moved. It stayed steady. It opened at 3.5. It stayed at 3.5 all the way till today. And now today it's at 4.5. So the line has moved a little bit towards Georgia on this game too. So there seems to be, Vegas has momentum moving in our direction. So what do I think the final score would be? I'm envisioning something like Georgia wins 27-13, 28-14, something like that. I'm envisioning it, being a little bit like the Kentucky game. I think Georgia comes out and plays strong from the get-go. I think this is a challenge game for Georgia, and I think that they have felt challenged recently, and I think Auburn will be strong. I mean, I think the first quarter might be one of those wash, but maybe one team's up 3-0 or it's 3-3 at the end of the first quarter. I think Georgia asserts itself the longer the game goes on. Especially if we don't make a bunch of mistakes, then I think Georgia's just better talent, better overall team, even though we're not as powerful as we want to see us be, and we haven't been dominating games like we have been. You look at what Georgia is this year and the last 2 years, you look at what Auburn is this year and the last 2 years, Georgia's still a more powerful team. And so if we play our game and play it right, don't make a lot of big mistakes, then, we could start fast and run to a blowout, or we could start pretty much neck and neck and then just keep pulling away and keep pulling away. The trend lately has been that we win the second and third and fourth quarters, and I kind of see it going that way. So my gut instinct is it's like a 7-3, 3-3, 7-0 game in the first quarter. Could be either team. And then by the time you get into the mid fourth quarter, I think, it'll have been maybe say, I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia has actually, made it feel like the game I described before, a blowout that doesn't end up as a blowout, because maybe we end up going into the fourth quarter. I said 27-13 or 28-14. So let's say it's 27-13. Well, that game might be 27 early in the fourth quarter, halfway through the fourth quarter. I could see that game being 27-7 or 27-6, let's say, and then let's say Auburn puts a late touchdown on to make it a 2-score game. So that's kind of the flow. That's how I feel like it goes. It could go the other way. Could be a 13-13 game entering the third quarter, and Georgia's just, again, wins the fourth quarter and pulls away. That makes sense too. I mean, that's a reasonable scenario. But I think 65, 68, 70% chance Georgia wins the game. I think there's at least a 1/3 chance that's a blowout. But I think even without a blowout, I think Georgia might surprise people and make a little bit more of a statement here today, going on the road against what looks like a pretty good Auburn team to a lot of people in a tough environment. And I think Georgia might make a statement by winning this by 2 scores, maybe only 10-13, 14 points, but 2 scores nonetheless, maybe on the cusp of the blowout. So that's what I think is going to happen. I hope so. I mean, that would be fun. It'd be obviously great to have a 38-0 beatdown, but I'll take, and any win will do, right? I'll be happy with a 1-point win if that's what it turns out to be. I think at this point, again, survive and advance is like, that's what a mantra always is in pro sports. And I think college sports is moving closer to pro sports. So I think we have to accept that that's kind of the mantra here. So listen, I appreciate you being with me. I also want to point out, by the way, I promised I would wear my Auburn got blacked out t-shirt from the blackout game from the 2007 season. I don't think you can see the back. It's got dramatic writing, says Auburn got blacked out, and it's got the score 45-20 on the back. And so all of it's black except for Auburn's score being in the orange and blue color. It's one of the only t-shirts that has back writing on it that I like, because it's got the huge score on the back, says 45-20, and that Auburn got blacked out. I wear the shirt for the Auburn game every year. Like I said, it's 15-3 since that game, which probably, of course, speaks more to the teams than it does the shirt. But I like to think it's the shirt. I take these things very seriously and personally. So, and I put it on today, and I only get I'm glad that it's at least gotten a little bit not hot outside, even if it's not cool, because this is a long sleeve shirt. It's very thick cotton, and it's actually one of the most comfortable shirts I own. I forgot that, but it's a little bit hard to wear with the October and September Auburn games. The November Auburn game, this was a perfect shirt. So I miss the old November Auburn game. I miss this game being a big who's going to finish their dreams on the season game between the two of them. I think that has taken a lot of the stakes away. Like I said yesterday, that this isn't a November game anymore, that like we have to, even if Auburn is a 5-6 team, and we're trying to clinch going to the SEC championship game and on to the playoff, it was so much more dramatic to play this rival second to last game of the year. Usually for us, the last SEC of the game. The Auburn-Alabama game is last for them, so they had one more SEC game. But for us, the Auburn game was always the last SEC game of the year. So if it came down to the last game where we had to clinch a special opportunity SEC-wise, the Auburn game always mattered. And I think that's one of the reasons, not just because Auburn's performance in recent years, but I think that's one of the reasons this game has lost the juice. The last 5 years of this being an October-September game has just taken away that last SEC game of the year finality to it that used to be so meaningful for both teams. And I think that's kind of sad. But I am glad that we're keeping Auburn as the permanent or annual opponent. This is an important game, as I've said all week, to me. And, I want to make sure that what's being heard at the end of today is not a bunch of War Eagle, for people who have tiger mascots. But what I do want to hear is just a never-ending chorus of, you know what it is. Say it with me. Go Dawg.